Right, I'm delighted to say I am
Thank
joined
you.
by Ross Hart from the Dunfermline Press. Ross, how's things? You okay?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you guys? And thank you very much for inviting me on.
No, it's great. You know, I thought, why not? We're all kind of wondering who this James Board person is. You know, we don't really know, but obviously he co-owns a football club at the moment. So I thought, who best to bring on? But someone that's, I don't know if you've met him or not. I don't think you have you? When we were just talking, briefly speaking before, like not met him face to face. But I thought maybe you might be able to shed a little bit of light on who he is. I have asked for some questions from people that are listening as well. So I'm not sure maybe some will be coming through as we get along. But Ross, I just wanted to kind of go back to, 'cause him and Evan Sofa have been in charge coming up to a year now, aren't they? It's at the end of January now. Was that kind of pretty straightforward when he came in? Was it rumbling on for a while, or was it out of the blue? How did it all kind of come about?
It was rumbling on for a little while. To give you, I won't bore you too much in terms of Dunfermline's sort of backstory here, but essentially the football club, we've been in administration. I'm a fan as well. The club went into administration in March of 2013, so we're all too aware of what's happening for yourselves down the road.
Yeah.
So it was a fan group that basically bought the club out of administration, bought the club, bought the stadium, etc., etc. There came a point where, in order to try and sort of move on to sort of further the club's ambitions, outside investment was sought. That came through an investment firm who were based in Hamburg, over in Germany, and that arrived sort of round about the time of COVID. That continued up until sort of last year, and there was a lot of fan frustration where the squad depth wasn't there. There wasn't a lot of investment in the first team, because I think their idea was to try and rear younger players, bring them through the academy, and then try and sell them on for profit, which in the current landscape of Scottish football, particularly in the second tier where Dunfermline are, not the easiest thing to do. So there's a bit of unrest, and they decided then they were going to sell up, and they appointed basically an investment sort of broker effectively to try and find a buyer. And then James Board almost sort of came out of nowhere. I don't think anybody in and around Dunfermline really knew anything too much about him, particularly. And then there was a big headline about him being an ex-poker player, ex-professional poker player, which obviously raised eyebrows, certainly. But once it became clear that he was the leading sort of party, him and Evan Sofa with their park bench company, there was a bit more sort of information came to light, and it wasn't just the fact that he was an ex-poker player. Obviously, he's been a banker as well, and then he's obviously an entrepreneur and successful businessman as well. So yeah, you're absolutely right. 18th of January last year is when the takeover was confirmed, and through park bench, James and Evan have got the majority shareholding in the club.
Yeah, I mean, were there many expectations when he came in? Because I mean, I think I'm right in saying the club are kind of, obviously it's been a year now, the club are pretty much in the similar situation in terms of league position, where they were when they came in. Am I right in saying that?
Well, when they came in, they were actually struggling. They were second bottom of the division, and there were serious relegation battle ahead. And they sacked the manager who'd been there for 2 or 3 years previous. He left before the takeover was confirmed. And the day before the takeover was confirmed, they appointed a new head coach, and the owners had a bit of input into that. Now, how much of the decision was down to them is open to question, but they certainly were involved in that. But unfortunately, that appointment didn't really work out for various reasons. And then, sort of in March, he only had 11 games in charge. He left the club, and then it was after that Neil Lennon was brought in. But yeah, Dunfermline were in serious relegation trouble for much of last season, and really it was only a 15-point deduction for one of the other teams in our division, Hamilton Academical, who ultimately were relegated. And they're in a really bad financial position just now, that really sort of stopped them from being involved, at least in a playoff, to avoid going down. So they were in a bit of a tricky situation. But this season there has been improvements. There's been very much an improvement in terms of the standard of football and the quality and the depth to the squad. And I think a lot of fans are realistic, and they know that this isn't going to be a sort of quick, short-term sort of fix, if you like. It's a notoriously competitive division, the second tier of Scottish football, the Championship, and I think a lot of fans are relatively pleased with how things are progressing, particularly obviously with having such a high-profile manager as Neil Lennon in charge.
Yeah, I was just about to say that as well, because I've looked down a list of former managers, and correct me if I'm wrong, but probably one of the most, if not the most, high-profile manager that you've had. I mean, I've looked down a list, other than Alan Johnston, who were former Sheffield Wednesday player, of course, back in the early 2000s. I saw that one on the list, but yeah, I mean, do you think that's down to the new owners that have had that kind of draw to bring him to the into the club?
100%, 100%. I think it was down to James Board particularly. He was the one who sort of made contact with Neil Lennon, and there was a lot of discussions between the two of them before Lennon came into the club. So that was March, and that was initially until the end of the season, where both parties were going to sort of review things. But I think it was pretty evident pretty quick that both of them were quite happy to carry on the arrangement. But Neil Lennon has been on record as saying that James Board was a really key sort of reason as to why he's at Dunfermline. I mean, of course, Dunfermline historically, I've got quite a rich and storied history in Scottish football, particularly in the 1960s, and success they had domestically and also in European football as well. And they are seen I know it's cliche, but they are seen as a little bit of a kind of sleeping giant, if you like, that have underachieved probably in the last 15, 20 years. And certainly, in my opinion, they have on the pitch. But so that would be part of it. But certainly the enthusiasm of James Board for the project, for the club, his ambitions for the club, those were huge ticks in the box for Neil Lennon to be at the club. And I don't think, if it wasn't for the current ownership, I should say, then I don't think Neil Lennon would be Dunfermline manager today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right in saying as well, he's been there once. He's attended one game in the time he's been there, which was fairly recently, weren't it?
That's right, yeah. It was the 20th of December, so just before Christmas. That was the first match he's attended at East End Park, Dunfermline's home ground. He did come to an away match at Falkirk back in March. That was the first time I think he'd seen the team play. Because he's predominantly based in Las Vegas, he was able to get over to as many matches as he can. But I know that Evan Sofer, he's been over as well, and he's watched some matches too. But the park bench, they do have a UK representative who isn't necessarily there at matches, but he is, I'm led to believe, kind of in and around the club on a fairly regular basis, kind of at the start of a working week, to see how things are going. But I know that the owners, they keep up to date fairly regularly. They watch games, obviously on the sort of streaming channel overseas. They're in regular communication with not just the manager, but David Cook, who's the chief executive of the football club, and obviously the local based directors as well. So they are, whilst they're not in the country a lot, I know that they are sort of very involved in discussions and how things are progressing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our previous owner, I can't name him because I can't bring myself to say his name anymore, as people that listen will already know. But he obviously from Thailand, spent a lot of time over there, was hardly over here, but he was very involved and too involved, if we're being honest. He didn't appoint a CEO. We had no director of football. It was basically he just made all the decisions were down to him, right down to things like buying pens and paper in the office and stuff. It was really, quite bad. I've heard you saying things like a CEO and stuff like that. Was there a structure like that in place before they came in, or have they made any changes or anything like that at all?
Yeah, no, but before he came in, David Cook had been appointed as sort of as chairman and CEO of the football club. He's worked at various clubs. He's worked at like Celtic and Everton and different places. Nottingham Forest is another one that he's worked at previously. And for Dunfermline's point of view, there's the added sort of bonus that he is a sort of Dunfermline fan himself. So he was already at the club and he was sort of in that role, but whilst also combining it with that of chairman, which is now sort of split. And he's now just fully CEO, and there's a former player, manager, legendary figure at the club, that's the chairman just now. So there was that kind of structure in place, certainly, and I think I get the impression certainly that the owners are quite happy to sort of trust these guys to kind of look after things sort of on a day-to-day basis, really.
Yeah, I mean, Ross, we know all about, well, I say we all, the big thing at the moment, given the links with our dear neighbours Sheffield United, is the AI exploits and the recruitment and things like that. You know, I think it's fair to say I don't think it went according to plan down at our neighbours. I think one of the players that they bought is actually at Dunfermline now. Caceres, I think
That's right.
Is his name.
Yeah, Jefferson Caceres, yeah.
Yeah, how, you know, I know it's only a short period of time, it's less than a year, which I don't think is much time really to kind of say or give a kind of a rating or a review on the transfer dealings and stuff. But what's it been like, and have you seen a bit of a shift in terms of the types of players that are being brought in at Dunfermline at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely been a focus on sort of younger players, and certainly the data analytics has been kind of involved from it early on. For example, in the last January transfer window, they signed a young player called Keith Bray, he's still a teenager. Signed him from Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, who are the league below. That's the club that produced Ryan Christie, who you may know of, who plays for Bournemouth and is obviously a Scotland international.
Yeah.
And they used the data there, and he rated very, very highly, and they paid a fee to sign him. So that side of it has been evident early on. So there's definitely been a shift towards the younger players with potential to develop further, with a view to potentially obviously being sold on, or as well as that for the squad to grow sort of as a collective together and sort of improve together. And I think there's been a lot of focus on the domestic market as well. Quite a lot of the players that have come in have been from other clubs in Scotland. For example, the young lad, Scotland Youth International, Rory McLeod, they brought him in from Dundee United. Charlie Gilmore, midfield player, ex-Arsenal youth. He was another one. He came from Inverness, Caledonian Thistle as well, having previously played for St Johnstone. So there's evidence that they're looking at the sort of the homegrown market, but they are undoubtedly using sort of data analysis and things to look further afield. For example, we've got a midfielder, Alphonso Amadi. He's actually at AFCON just now, playing for Mozambique. He played for Septemvre Sofia, which is a club that James Ward has a minority stakeholder in Bulgaria. So yeah, it was the data analytics sort of identified him. Similarly, there's a Ghanaian defender, Nuruddin Abdullahi, again, young player as well, centre back, and he's become a bit of a fan favourite already with the way he's progressing. And certainly that was a kind of certainly heavily led by data. And any player that I think they are interested in, the data analysis is used, but certainly Neil Lennon also wants to sort of be looking at players. For example, I referenced Charlie Gilmore there. He was one that Lennon did go and watch himself as well. And he's very keen that any players that come in have to be not just of the required quality, but the right set of character and things for the dressing room. So whilst the data analysis plays a part, it's not the full sort of tool in terms of recruitment, certainly at Dunfermline at the moment anyway.
Yeah, I think that is a bit of a worry that people, certainly Sheffield Wednesday fans, think it's just going to be like playing on Football Manager on your PC, where you're just like, yep, I'll have him because the numbers look good. But I think that's quite refreshing to hear that it's not just that there's a bit of manual input as well into who's going to be signing. Obviously, we were talking before, Ross, and you were saying how it's not just stuff on the pitch that's changed. They've also, in a short space of time, made changes off the pitch as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest things has been the actual pitch. Last season, it was very much maligned. I lost track of the number of opposition managers that were not happy to having to come and play on it. And it was, I've watched them for about 30 years now, and it's probably the worst it's been. It was really heavily rutted, and the winter last year really, really ruined it. So effectively, they needed to rip it up and replace it, which they did in the summer, which came at a significant cost to the new owners. So they did that. They've sort of invested in sort of the hospitality areas as well. They've got new sort of catering people in to try and what they believe would be improve the experience. They've introduced sort of new hospitality lounges, one of which is sponsored by Carling. So basically fans can go in and pour their own pints before the game and stuff like that, which has been very popular. It's sold out for the season. So things like that. And even just like round about the stadium in terms of the catering kiosks and things like that. They've sought to try and sort of change that up and offer sort of a better experience for fans effectively. It's not all going to be changed overnight. I think there's still a lot of what they would like to do, certainly. But these are little things that supporters can see evidence of investment in the club, which has given them sort of hope, really, because for a few years there, it wasn't necessarily for the lack of wanting to do it. Just the money wasn't quite there to do these sorts of things. But the new owners are sort of keen to do that. And one thing they did do when they first took over was they issued an open letter to supporters, which one of the standout lines from that was where they said was, as private individuals, we prefer to let our actions speak louder than our words. So whilst we've not had the opportunity to speak to either James or Evan formally so far, I think they just want to sort of let fans see for themselves, the kind of improvements and investment that they are making in the club.
Yeah, I've got a question from Dan Langton, and he just asks, how are the finances at Dunfermline? Is that something that's known at the moment?
The last set of financial results weren't too great. They did post a significant loss, however, that was before sort of the takeover happened, and what we were told was after the takeover was that they inherited the club sort of debt-free from the previous ownership, who effectively sort of wrote off any losses, basically. So as far as I'm aware, the club will be is in pretty good health in that regard. David Cook has been on record a couple of times. Most recently, there was a fan forum event that was open to all supporters in the town. And he
Ross,
again
just stop me there. The words "fan forum" sends a shudder down my spine. I don't know if the news travelled north, but we had a fan forum in January, which lasted about, I think it was about 5 hours, 4.5 hours. It was absolutely ridiculous. And nothing even came of it. There's a lot of waffle and things. So yeah, hearing those words, it's not great.
Apologies, I didn't want to come on here and swear.
You can swear if you want, mate. You can.
But yeah, it was a well attended event, and David Cook again just kind of reiterated that the guys know that what their financial sort of commitments are to the club, and they're pretty comfortable with it. But obviously, given Dunfermline's financial history, I mentioned that the club went into administration in 2013, and at one point the possibility of the club going under was very, very serious. And it actually led. There was a decision in a court that if it went the other way, then the club might have gone out of existence. So there's a lot. There are fans that are obviously sort of almost kind of like, when they think back to that, there's always going to be sort of questions and the need for sort of reassurance, certainly. But time will tell in terms of when the next financial set of results come out. But I know that the club are looking to be aggressive again in the January transfer market. So we'll see what happens over the next month or so in that regard.
Have they set out any ambitions? I'm guessing it is to get to the Premier League. Is that what have they actually come out and said that? Is that what they're looking to do?
Yeah, that's definitely the ambition, certainly. Dunfermline haven't been in the top flight for coming up 13, 14 years now, which is the longest period that they've been out of it in my lifetime, certainly. So that's definitely the priority. And James Board and Neil Lennon has actually mentioned it as well, that ultimately they would like to get them back to the Premier League, sustained in the Premiership, and then push for European football, which is a lofty ambition because of the layout of Scottish football. When you look at some of the clubs that you'd be competing against with their size, support bases, and finance, etc. But they are certainly quite ambitious. But the first step and the first challenge is to get back to the top flight, which won't be easy. But they're certainly setting their ambitions high, that's for sure.
Yeah, I asked that because obviously whenever new owners come in, and I think sometimes it's a little bit lazy to say, Premier League in 5 years and what have you. But yeah, we'll have to see if it is James Board that comes in. We'll have to find out. Kind of finally, I guess. In terms of what the fans' perception of the ownership at the moment, obviously you say you're a fan yourself as well. What's the temperature like at the moment?
I think it's fairly positive. I mean, like everybody else, you would hope that they might be sitting a little bit higher in the table in terms of the football results, sitting fifth at the moment. But I think fans are quite positive about things. What they did do was they said that there would want to be a lot of sort of more openness and transparency, which fans maybe didn't feel they had under the previous sort of investment group. And whilst James Bond and Evan Sofer haven't necessarily done that themselves, there's been a lot of sort of regular monthly sort of communication coming from the club, big club updates from the CEO, some of which might not be hugely sort of earth-shattering stuff, but I mean it's a big step forward from what's happened before. And I think fans, they can see that there's progress being made on and off the pitch, and certainly they can see that there's ambition there, with what they're trying to do in terms of sort of producing a younger sort of age squad. Certainly throughout this season in the Scottish Championship, Dunfermline's average age has been the youngest in the division, and actually it's been one of the youngest in Scotland. So they can see that what they're trying to do, and certainly having a guy like Neil Lennon, who's obviously a very, very big name, and obviously hugely experienced as well. That's certainly given fans hope that there's brighter days ahead. But time will tell.
Yeah, Ross, I said that was last bit. I've got a question on YouTube from Hoopapoose. What a wonderful name that is. It says, are their fans worried about the Sheffield Wednesday link? I mean, he has got one other club, hasn't he? And if I'm right in saying that he's not linked with Cordoba, is he? Is that someone else in the?
No, he's got a link to them as well.
Okay.
He's got a minority stake there too. Yeah, it's a good question, and yeah, I think there certainly are. Yeah, there's certainly in some of my circle of friends of Pars fans that they are sort of wondering, if the board the board consortium, obviously takes over down at you guys, where does that leave sort of Dunfermline's position? Does he focus more on, obviously Sheffield Wednesday, huge club, as we all know, huge potential there if things can go right, and what does he sort of draw back investment here? We don't know that. Certainly there are people that are sort of worried about that, but from certainly from my sources kind of at the club, they're not particularly sort of concerned in relation to that at the moment anyway, for sure. But yeah, there are fans that are obviously kind of sort of questioning that, definitely. But it'll be interesting to see. I think because we don't know who else is maybe in the consortium or who's part of this bid, and how involved he will be. He's not one that kind of seeks publicity, from what we understand anyway. So whether he would then take on a sort of real sort of day-to-day, properly hands-on role, or what would he then have a structure a bit like what he's got at Dunfermline, i.e. put people in positions that he trusts to kind of sort of deal with that side in terms of like the media and day-to-day stuff. That might be a route that he would go down, certainly. But yeah, no, absolutely. There's definitely people that have questioned that, and I guess it would all become clear in the future if this bid is successful and he becomes involved down at Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, definitely. Ross, massive thanks for joining me. I do really appreciate you jumping on this evening, and great to, because we don't know much about him at all, so great to have an insight. Like you said, if it does happen, again, that is still kind of up in the air. We're not sure if he is going to be the new owner or what capacity it's going to be in, but yeah, great to hear from yourself as well, Ross, and all the best for the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and all the best for you guys as well. Hope things all work out for you. You're a huge football club, and obviously we've got a shared hero in Lee Bullen as well, who left ourselves to come down to you back in the day. So really hope it all works out for you, and there's brighter days ahead for you guys.
Great stuff, Ross. Thank you very much. Do really appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's Ross Hart from Dunfermline Press as well, talking about James Board and giving us a bit of an insight as to what